Welcome to the last track walk of 2020. We're here at Whilton Mill and I'm joined by senior Rotax driver Maciej Hamera. Maciej, your favourite track, I'm led to believe, but even in today's weather?
Yeah, it's definitely one of my favourites, and trust me, there are plenty of to choose from, which is quite difficult. But even in this rain, I think this is probably the nicest circuit to drive, especially in these conditions, because you can really get a car to handle around this circuit. You don't need to be playing with the throttle or anything like that to be really on the edge of adhesion. Here you can just get a car quickly dialed in to really perform.
It's fast, it's bumpy, it's one of the most physical circuits in the entire country for you guys, the drivers, and as we're about to find out, there's plenty of interesting corners and opportunities to make the final round of the Rotax and Cadet Honda Championship the most exciting all year. Let's go and check it out.
Absolutely, let's go.
So I've got to say that the first couple of corners at Whilton Mill are amongst my favourite in the entire country. Literally, you go off into oblivion and then you come around here at Crook. Maciej, it's virtually flat out. There's not a lot of runoff that you can legally use on the exit. A little bit of camber as well. Spectacular stuff. Do you love it as much as me?
I think it's absolutely great. I mean, it's a bit of a game of who dares wins, isn't it? So you have to, so you really have to put your neck on the line, so to speak, to really get the best out of this corner. Starts can be particularly frantic here because mostly in karting, you have medium speed corners if you think about your clay pigeons, your PFIs even. But here you've got 30, 35 karts on the grid funneling into these two really quick sections, and everybody has to, it's pretty much single file as well. There's not a lot of room for side by side, so everybody has to be on their best behavior or it's just going to end in the wall, unfortunately.
And as we all know in karting, not everyone is on their best behavior all the time. But nonetheless, I mean, you're a little lift off here. Are you kind of moving out towards the exit at the edge of this circuit to get a better run straight line out of this corner, or are you forced over here to sort of hook the cart up, because you can see again the tire marks on the exit of the curb there where people are hooking the curbs. Yeah, when you come out of that first apex, are you staying left or moving right?
Well, I can say that first curb is pretty much useless. We mostly use it just to straight line this corner so the deeper you go over it, the straighter line you have, the more you can rotate the cart for this corner, which is where you get your slingshot up the hill, which is so vital. So absolutely, I think just kind of keeping it straight so the cart is really nicely balanced for this corner.
Well, it's nicely balanced, but I hope you've got your hiking boots on, because we're about to walk up one of the steepest hills in British karting, all the way up to Christmas. Let's go. So after the long run up from Oblivion, through Fine Lady, up the straight, here we are at Christmas corner. And Maciej, it's not a very merry Christmas though if you get it wrong coming out of this corner. There's a nasty, nasty curve behind us, but it's a real chance to get the fastest part of the entire track, flat out all the way up here, even in the rain.
Absolutely flat out all the way. This is really where you can gain the most positions on track, I would say. The run up to the corner is very wide, so I've seen people going 3-4 wide and still not stuff it into the gravel trap, so that's all good. So absolutely, I mean, in the wet it's much different here. Normally you avoid these curbs in the dry because they're so high and they just completely unsettle the car, ruin the balance in the dry. But in the wet you have to take those risks to get those seconds off your lap time.
And I suppose you don't really notice it in the kart so much, or you don't even really notice it on TV. But when you're walking it, the reason that people don't go spearing off of there is gravity, because this hill is really quite steep, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is. It is such a climb. The only time you notice is when you do the track walk. In the car, when you're following somebody, you don't notice it at all, which is why it's so vital to have a good setup, which is geared for the straight right here, because that's where you're going to gain or lose, not one position, but at least 3 or 4.
Now, from here, we're going to go across the top of the circuit, through Crook, off camber, on camber, down to the next real action point, which is Ashby's. Let's go. Here we are at Ashby's. Now, Maciej, you're coming downhill, off camber, bit of a curve on the inside, a drop off on the outside, a tricky corner, yeah?
Absolutely, it is critical to get your braking right for this corner. It's a proper karting corner, as I like to call it. You've got a bunch of twisty section to change your line to try and get the advantage on your opponent before you attempt a move into this corner. So it's really quite critical to change your line to line up, and then it's just a simple case of smashing that pedal almost through the floor of the kart. You feel like you're smashing it, but you have to be that kart because it's pretty much a hairpin. Doesn't look like that from, for example, a track map, but absolutely it's quite a difficult corner.
Because you're flat out coming down here, and you don't really see it on the camera, but you're off camber, on camber, off camber, on camber, downhill, off camber, then uphill again. And it's really bumpy as well. This is one of the most physical tracks.
Absolutely right. I mean, if you're not properly seated in the kart, if you don't have, for example, foam padding as we do, which is what we use to stop drivers moving about, you get smashed from one side to the other. It is really quite physical, and by about 4 or 5 laps of that, you get pretty tired. So it is really important for this section specifically to be properly seated in the kart.
Well, you don't want to get too tired because we've got another 2 complexes coming up. Let's go and have a look at them. Out of Wilkins, down the hill, again, more gradient changes into Chapman's. Big curb on the inside, it doubles back on the apex there, so you've got to get a good run out of it. And also, in this weather, the mud on the exit, so any small misjudgment of braking is going to have major consequences.
Absolutely, absolutely. I don't even think you need to misjudge your braking, because when you're going into this corner, you're just like, will it, and it does finally bite. The kart finally gets around the corner, and you manage to avoid that horrible muddy stuff, because you put half a wheel on that, you're going straight off in there, and that's going to seriously affect your race.
Now, talk about the switchback section. Are you sacrificing the early apex here to get a good run at the exit of the corner, or you're running a little bit out wide and straight lining it as much as you can onto like the middle straight? Because after the middle straight, the boot is extremely important, isn't it?
Absolutely, I agree with you. The problem is when you get to the boot, a driver will quite often defend. He'll look back over his shoulder, he'll say you're right on him, and then he'll defend into that corner. So most of the time it's actually clever to overtake into this corner, because you'd be surprised how late you can lunge into this corner and still get away with it, because as it doubles back you have to cut across, and because of the way the straight is arranged, then that driver won't have anywhere to go. So this is a key overtaking spot, and in my opinion even more effective than the boot.
And I suppose if you're really clever, you get down the inside of someone here and you're squeezing them wide, they are going to run out of track, aren't they? So they've got to brake or go over the curb and the mud and lose a lot of ground if you can get it and stick it on the inside.
Yes, an experienced driver would realise what would happen if he stayed on the outside. So we'll see this weekend. It'll be quite interesting to see who's driven lots of laps here and who hasn't, to see who gets caught out by this section, because this corner is very inviting when somebody goes on the inside of you. Oh, I'll just keep it around the outside. There's plenty of grip, but you've got that horrible curb. That driver will not leave you any space. You leave that space on the outside, and that driver will be going straight off.
Well, there's more excitement to come. If this section wasn't exciting enough, the last section, the boot, well, that's got plenty of excitement in store. Let's go and have a look at it. So Magic, we've made it. The last corner, the exit of the boot. You come in, you go left, double apex right, flat out downhill, and then around the last corner onto the start-finish straight. Again, a deceptively difficult corner, and as you can see, that has got to be the biggest curb I have seen all season. Not one that a privateer driver like you wants to investigate with any regularity.
Yes, I'm afraid times have changed. I remember when I first started, this was a much flatter curb, which you could pretty much jump over if you wanted to. But now in the wet it is something to avoid, as you can do serious damage to your car. But in the dry, normally you don't want to be anywhere near that, as that's really going to compromise you down the straight.
And also what's going to compromise you is the runoff. Now, a lot has been said about the runoff, how much of it you can use, how much of it you can't use. Does that mean that making a lunge up the inside into this curb into this turn is a no-no, because you don't want to run wide and go all 4 wheels over the white line? Or are you taking a wide line in and then just trying to get it as fast as you can down the straight? But if you leave it too wide, someone can always slide at the inside of you, can't they?
Yes, that is the case most of the time. I think it's a case of, this is a bit of an unlucky section of track, I'm afraid. You have to just be a bit patient here, and really just wait until you get to Christmas, really, because there really isn't an overtaking opportunity going into the first corner unless you have a driver which is very complacent on their behalf. But yes, I would say don't make the move here, as you might seriously risk getting a penalty due to the runoff area.
Well, Magic, thank you very much for giving us a guided tour around Whilton Mill. Let's see if you can put your words into actions over the next 2 days. That's it for our track walk. Thank you very much to Maciej Hamera. Let's see how he gets on in the racing a little bit later on.